With the price of vintage Roland drum machines skyrocketing over the past few years, 808s and 909s going for $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, depending on which marketplace you're looking at, which time, you have to wonder why the TR-606, a contemporary of those two, is still able to be picked up for $500 to $800. Let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Zach Marr from Alamo Music here in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications. This is our Alamo Sound Lab channel where we talk about all things music tech related. And today we're talking about the classic Roland TR-606. And I have always been curious why this one is still relatively, I should say relatively, because $500 to $800 for a 40-year-old piece of gear is not necessarily the cheap. When someone says cheap, that's not what comes to mind. But it's relatively affordable compared to some of the contemporary vintage analog Roland machines of that time. You look at its twin brother, the TB-303, and those are anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000. And it's not terribly less sophisticated than a TB-303. Why are these so affordable in relation to the 808 and the 909? Wanted to give you some of my thoughts and a little of the history of the 606. The 606 belongs in this category of failed Roland drum machines that later went on to be iconic in their ability to influence and create genres. The 808 being the iconic hip-hop drum machine and the 909 being an iconic dance and acid and house music drum machine used in all sorts of different genres in the 90s and pop. The 606 also played a big role in house and acid music as well as some punk. And so you have to wonder why the 606 is so much more affordable than the 808 and the 909. Fortunately, we happen to have one of each here at Alamo Music. So I've gotten to play with each of these, and the 606 definitely is not lacking when it comes to a really nice sound and experience when you're playing with it. If I had to describe it, I would describe it as a midpoint between the 808 and the 909. There's a little less flexibility, there isn't individual outs, and you can't do as much with the individual voices in terms of tuning them and having small parameters that you can affect. But its form factor, it's much smaller than the other two, and it's very streamlined in its kind of design. To me, it's the most intuitive and easy to use of the three, and I personally really like the sound. Its most iconic use for me personally is the Nine Inch Nails Closer song. I think that is a 606 featured heavily in the drum section, and I really like the 606. I don't know why these are still so affordable. Maybe there is more quantity available. I wasn't able to find how many of these were originally produced, and so that might play a part in why they're less expensive than the 808 and the 909. But even other kind of more obscure or less popular drum machines like the CR8000, the TR-707, the 626, some of those have gone up in price over and above the 606, and that surprises me because I think the 606 is very classic analog Roland drum tone. There's a couple mods that you can get to get individual outs as well as some parameter control over the sounds, which really I've heard liven it up quite a bit. One of the other things that it's iconic for is it has 2 trigger outs, which was really nice in control in more complex setups in performance settings and often used by musicians and kind of loved feature. So it's interesting that, again, it is not the most expensive of the classic vintage Roland drum machines. And we're starting to see recreations. Behringer made the RD6, which was an analog recreation, and Roland made a boutique series, the TR-06. And it's interesting to see the market reception. It hasn't been super enthusiastic for either of those. I think partially because, again, the 606 has, I think, a cult following, but it's not massively popular in the same way as an 808 clone or a 909 clone, a boutique clone, a Behringer clone, a VST. Those always get a lot of attention. The 06 and the Behringer RD6 and the TR-606 still are relatively unloved, in my opinion, unwarrantedly. So let's take a listen. Going to play some simple things so you can get a sense of the way it sounds, and we'll conclude with some final thoughts about, is it worth it? Is it a good investment today? So there you have it. I really like the tone. It's very pleasant when I play alongside it with an instrument. It's always super inspiring. It's the one, if I have to pick one up and set it up to play real fast, I always choose the 606 because it's so accessible and easy to just get into. I think constraint breeds creativity, and this one always finds me being more creative with it when I'm using it. The options on the market besides having a vintage 606 are the RD6 and the TR-06 alongside, I think, some other replicas and VSTs. And I think from what I've heard and what I've got to experience, and I say this with an asterisk, but none of them quite sound exactly like a vintage 606, and that's because vintage 606 don't quite sound like each other. They each have a history, they each have aging going on in the componentry, and each one sounds a little different. And so it's hard to create a clone or a replica of these original units. I like the sound, the age and the wear and tear sound that you often find in these units. It has a kind of aura, and it's difficult to describe, but it might be all in my head, but I like vintage pieces. Is it worth it? I think if you can pick one up for under sub $500, that's a pretty good deal, and I don't think they're going to go down in value. Paying $800 for one, I don't know. I think that's a little much, but the vintage market is totally irrational, and the heart wants what the heart wants. So who knows what will happen with prices on these things. It's probably the least expensive. I think it's the best value analog drum machine you can find from in the Roland era. Compared to its contemporaries and other things that you can pick up for the money. So from a music standpoint, I really like a 606 sound. It's probably not the best investment musically because there's a ton of options, affordable options, Roland Cloud, all sorts of stuff that you can get that sound in another version. I think if you're playing with vintage analog instruments, it mixes well with those, or even modern analog instruments. If you have a more digital setup, it might not be a great thing to put into your sound and to add to your toolkit. So those are my kind of thoughts on it. Would love to hear your thoughts. Is there information that I left out? Is there things about the 606 that should be more widely known and appreciated? Would love to hear your experiences with it. Do you like the way it sounds? Do you not like the way it sounds? How do you think it compares to an 808, 909? Please leave your comments below. Would love to talk to you more. If you haven't, again, I would really appreciate you subscribing and turning on your notifications if you'd like to see more content. And if you'd like to talk more, you can find us at alamomusic.com. Hit us up with a chat, phone call, email. Love to talk to you there. Thank you for watching.